reporting live on what has become one of the most intense and uncertain moments in American political history. It is the 2000's elections between Texas Governor George W. Bush and the Vice President Al Gore. As the votes came in on November 7th, the race was neck to neck. Now, all eyes are on one state, Florida. Whoever wins Florida will determine who becomes the next president of the United States. And right now, the margin is very thin. Just a few hundred votes separate the two candidates. However, public disclaimer, the popular vote does not determine the presidency. Instead, we go by whoever runs the electoral college. Because the vote is so close, Florida's law requires a machine recount. But that's only the beginning. Confusion has erupted, especially over punch card ballots, claiming that the holes weren't punched correctly. Some of these are what people are calling hanging chads. These tiny bits of paper are causing a nationwide crisis. What counts as a vote? Should partially punched ballots be included? Counties across Florida are interpreting things differently. And now, lawyers from both parties are descending on the state. Lawsuits are piling up, and this battle is making its way through the state and federal courts. Just today, we've learned that the United States Supreme Court is stepping in. The case, Bush versus Gore, will determine whether the manual recounts in Florida will continue. The stakes couldn't be higher. Both candidates believe they've won. Protesters and reporters are crowding courthouses. Americans are glued to their TVs, waiting to find out who the next president will be. Prior to the Bush versus Gore Supreme Court case, there was actually another Supreme Court case called Bush versus Palm Beach County Canvassing Board. Since we know by now that the election is heavily dependent on Florida, this is where Al Gore challenged the decision of Florida's Secretary of State, Captain Harris, to certify the results of the presidential election by November 14th, which was the deadline provided by Florida's election law. As a result, the Florida Supreme Court actually held that Harris could not certify the results until November 26th. It was also stated that Harris had to include the results of the manual recounts. As a result, George W. Bush and Captain Harris went to the U.S. Supreme Court to appeal the decision. It is now December 12, 2000, and we're still arguing the case of Bush versus Gore. So far, by a vote of 7-2, the court has found that Florida's inconsistent recount purposes have violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. And more specifically, by a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that there was no fair way to recount the votes in Florida in time for the state's votes to be counted in the Electoral College. This ruling effectively hands George W. Bush the presidency and the 25 electoral votes from Florida. So, as stated before, although Al Gore won the popular vote by at least 500,000 votes, George W. Bush ended up surpassing him in the electoral votes. You need 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. George W. Bush had 271 to Al Gore's 266. Bush will now become the 43rd president of the United States. This is a very unforeseen moment in the history of democracy. Now, questions about voting, technology, elective fairness, and the role of courts are now front and center. It's a story we'll be studying for many years to come. Reporting live, you have your presidential news, and now you know your 43rd president. I'm Kalia, signing out.
And sometimes our differences run so deep, it seems we share a continent, but not a country. We do not accept this, and we will not allow it. Our unity, our union, is the serious work of leaders and citizens in every generation. And this is my solemn pledge. I will work to build a single nation of justice and opportunity.